Today I'll be discussing three fictional characters and the psychological disorders they most closely represent based on behaviors shown in their films. The three characters I selected are Carl Fredricksen from Up, Kenai from Brother Bear, and Marlin from Finding Nemo. I'll explain each character's psychological and behavioral profile, the diagnosis that best fits them using information from our course, and finally providing a brief integration and conclusion. Before describing Carl's behaviors, I'd like to give an overview of the film Up. The movie follows Carl, an elderly widower who decides to fulfill his lifelong adventure he planned with his late wife Ellie by tying thousands of balloons to his house and flying to South America. Along the way, he meets a young boy named Russell and begins a journey that forces him to confront his grief and reconnect with others. This was ironically one of my favorite films to watch when I was a caretaker for an elderly woman who had dementia and was also a widow. For Carl Fredricksen's psychological and behavior profile, he shows several symptoms connected to depression. Carl withdraws from social interactions, spending most of his time alone and avoiding people around him. He also becomes irritable and easily frustrated, especially when dealing with Russell, who's a younger boy that's unfamiliar with social boundaries. Or he also gets frustrated with the construction workers that were building right outside of his house. He loses interest in activities he once loved, including the adventures he and Ellie dreamed of. And then finally, Carl experiences persistent sadness related to losing Ellie, which is shown throughout his emotional attachment to her belongings and their scrapbooks. Throughout the film, as he makes his journey to South America, he learns to physically and emotionally let go by throwing out all of their belongings out of their house, because as the balloons weren't holding up anymore, he realized he had to let go to finish his journey. It's quite tragic yet poetic. Based on the course content, Carl demonstrates several symptoms consistent with major depressive disorder. These include persistent sadness, loss of interest in enjoyable activities, the withdrawal from others, and irritability. His symptoms also interfere with his daily functioning, such as his difficulty managing stress or interacting with others, and then also maintaining routines that he has. So these behaviors support the diagnosis of major depressive disorder. This picture I included also depicts his general expression throughout the movie. It was either this or he was irritable. Alright. The movie Brother Bear follows Kenai, which we'll learn it transforms into this bear. He was a young Inuit man after losing his brother Sitka during an attack with a mother bear. Sitka sacrifices himself to save Kenai and their other brother, which leaves Kenai devastated. In his anger and grief, Kenai hunts down and kills the mother bear. As punishment and for emotional growth, the spirits transform him into a bear. Throughout the movie, Kenai tries to find his way home and figure out how to get back to his human form. But along that journey, he ends up meeting a cub named Coda, and they build a brotherly relationship, although he was hesitant initially. Kenai eventually discovers that the bear he killed prior to becoming a bear himself was actually Coda's mother, which adds this other layer of guilt and emotional conflict. These events lead to several symptoms connected to trauma and PTSD. Kenai experiences emotional numbness after Sitka's death, avoiding his feelings and refusing to process what happened. He shows anger and irritability, especially in the early scenes where he lashes out at others, including Coda, because he doesn't know how to cope. Kenai demonstrates guilt based avoidance, trying to distance himself from the truth about killing Koda's mother and avoiding responsibility for it. He also experiences intrusive memories and distress whenever Sitka is mentioned or when he faces reminders of the attack. These patterns reflect trauma rooted in both witnessing his brother's death and causing the death of Koda's mother. Kenai's symptoms are consistent with post traumatic stress disorder, specifically trauma related to Sitka's death and his own actions. PTSD includes intrusive thoughts, emotional numbing, guilt avoidance, and anger outbursts. Kenai displays all of these symptoms. His transformation journey in the movie symbolizes him processing trauma and moving toward healing. The movie Finding Nemo centers on Marlin, who is an overprotective clownfish that becomes extremely anxious initially after his wife and most of their eggs or babies are killed by a barracuda early in the movie. This leads to him becoming like an overly protective father that is cautious of like all things that could be putting his son in an unsafe situation. When his only surviving child, Nemo, is captured by a diver, Marlin has to go on this journey across the ocean to rescue him. Along the way, he encounters many kinds of dangers that force him to confront his fears. Marlin shows several behaviors related to anxiety. He becomes overly controlling and fearful when protecting Nemo. Marlin avoids anything risky and constantly imagines worst case scenarios. He struggles with excessive worry that he can't control and shows physical signs of tension and panic throughout the film. His anxiety impacts his ability to let Nemo grow and explore, which leads Nemo to rebel, setting off the events of the story. Marlin's symptoms best fit generalized anxiety disorder. Two features of this are excessive worry and difficulty controlling anxiety, both of which Marlin shows throughout the film. His anxiety interferes with his ability to make decisions, enjoy life, and allow Nemo independence. These symptoms strongly support the diagnosis of him likely having generalized anxiety disorder. When looking across all three characters, each one of them shows a distinct pattern of psychological symptoms. Carl's is rooted in grief and depression, Kenai's is in trauma and guilt, and Marlin's is in chronic anxiety. This shows how different life experiences can lead to very different mental health outcomes. Diagnosis helps us identify patterns and understand what a character is struggling with, but treatment would look different for each one. Carl would benefit from therapy focused on depression and grief. Kenai would need trauma-focused therapy or treatment and emotional processing, while Marlin would benefit from anxiety management techniques such as cognitive behavioral therapy. Although these treatments are only examples and each character's recovery could vary, I thought it was a little bit funny by putting kelp in Marlin's treatment out because he's a fish. I guess Kenai's a bear, but you get the idea. I was just being funny. Overall, these characters demonstrate how psychological disorders can appear in everyday behavior and how support and healing can look different for everyone. This will conclude my presentation. Here are the references I used to inform my project.